You are listening to the Pregnancy Podcast with Vanessa Merton.
Hello, thank you for tuning into the Pregnancy Podcast. In today's episode, we're covering several questions about prenatal vitamins. You probably know that taking a prenatal vitamin during pregnancy is important, but there's a little bit more to it than just that simple advice. I have received several questions in the last week about prenatal vitamins. Questions like, when should you start taking a prenatal? Is it really that different from a multivitamin? What can you do if you have trouble swallowing pills or your prenatal is giving you nausea? And how long should you continue taking a prenatal after you have your baby? In this episode, we're going to answer all of those questions and more, and we're also going to get a little bit into folate versus folic acid and supplementing with iron. You can find the complete transcript and all of the resources for this episode at pregnancypodcast.com/vitamin questions. You are on the public feed of the podcast, which gives you access to a limited number of episodes, and you will hear advertisements. Become a Pregnancy Podcast Premium member for an ad-free experience. Plus, you get access to hundreds of episodes exclusively available to premium members. One of my favorite things about doing this podcast is that I spend so much time researching, digging through evidence, going down all the rabbit holes so that you don't have to. Whatever you're looking for more information on, whether it's a pregnancy symptom or if you're debating about including something in your birth plan, there is an episode of the Pregnancy Podcast that has all the information you need. Check out Pregnancy Podcast Premium at pregnancypodcast.com/premium. If you have listened to the podcast for a while, you know that I have done a lot of research on prenatal vitamins and many of the components that go into them. You could easily spend hours comparing brands and still not feel sure which one to choose. My number one recommendation for a prenatal vitamin is the Zoller Prenatal Plus DHA. And that's because Zoller goes above and beyond in formulating their vitamin with high-quality ingredients like the active form of folate, bioavailable iron, and essential nutrients like omega-3s. In the month of November 2025, save 35% on the Zoller Prenatal Plus DHA on Amazon with the code PREPOD35. You can always check for the current promo code at pregnancypodcast.com/vitamin. I had 3 separate emails with questions about prenatal vitamins. The first one comes from Kim. She says, "Hi, Vanessa. Thank you for all of the amazing podcast episodes. I have a question about prenatal vitamins. My husband and I are trying to conceive, and I don't know when I should start taking a prenatal. I have a multivitamin that I really like. Is it okay to continue taking that until I'm pregnant, or should I start taking a prenatal now? Is there really a big difference between them?" Thank you, Kim, for submitting your question. So first, let's talk about prenatal vitamins versus multivitamins. When you're pregnant, you have increased nutrient requirements, and prenatal vitamins are formulated differently from a typical multivitamin. And that's because prenatals contain ingredients that you need more of during pregnancy. 2 big examples of those are higher levels of iron and folic acid, or folate. Everybody needs iron, but it's really critical during pregnancy. Iron is a component of hemoglobin. This is a substance in your red blood cells that carries oxygen from your lungs throughout your body. When you're pregnant, your blood volume increases by 50%, and that requires a lot of additional iron. If you are deficient in iron during pregnancy, it can cause adverse outcomes like premature labor, or for your baby to have a low birth weight and impaired cognitive and behavioral development. So iron is really important. Prenatals tend to have higher amounts of that. The other really important ingredient that prenatal vitamins include is folic acid. Folic acid or folate helps prevent neural tube defects. And folate is water soluble, so it doesn't remain in your system for long, which means that you have to replenish your supply consistently through your diet or through a supplement. Folate deficiencies are pretty rare, but folate is essential when you're pregnant because it helps prevent neural tube defects, and those are serious abnormalities of the brain and spinal cord. Folate and folic acid are often used interchangeably. And I realize I think I just did that as I was talking about them, but they're not the same thing. Folate is also known as vitamin B9. This is found naturally in foods like green veggies, fruits, eggs, liver, dairy products, and beans. Folic acid is synthetic folate, and this is what's most often used in supplements, vitamins, and fortified foods. So the main difference here, folic acid does not occur naturally. Now, I know it's easy to make the generalization that natural is always better than artificial, but that doesn't mean that artificial or synthetic has no practical application, because in many cases it does. There is overwhelming evidence for the protective effect of folic acid supplementation both before pregnancy and during early pregnancy on the development of neural tube defects in newborns. Because of this, folic acid was introduced as a mandatory food fortification in the United States back in 1998. Most prenatal vitamins include folic acid rather than folate. There's a couple reasons for this. One is that synthetically produced folic acid is a lot cheaper than naturally occurring folate. Also, folic acid is technically absorbed twofold better than folates. But that assumes that your body metabolizes folate well. You may have heard of MTHFR. This is short for methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. This is a critical enzyme in folate metabolism that's involved in DNA methylation, synthesis, and repair. About half of the population is estimated to be carriers of certain polymorphisms in genes that are related to folate metabolism. So this is what's going on if you hear somebody say that they have an MTHFR mutation. People that have these polymorphisms don't process folic acid into methylfolate well. And methylfolate is the biologically active form that's needed at the cellular level. Now, I know I'm probably going into way too much detail here, but there's so much confusion about folate and folic acid, so I wanted to kind of clarify exactly what those are and how they differ. You don't need to go out and get a genetic test to see if you have this mutation. Really, the whole reason I'm getting into this is it's going to explain why I prefer the active forms of folate over folic acid in a prenatal vitamin. From everything I see, any really high quality prenatal vitamin is going to have active forms of folate. In addition to iron and folate, remember you're supplying your growing baby with every single nutrient that they need. And this is why prenatals include other vitamins and nutrients like choline or DHA. Any vitamin is soluble in either fat or water. Fat-soluble vitamins, like vitamin D, you can store so that you can use them later, but water-soluble vitamins need to be replenished regularly. And that's why it's important that you are taking a daily prenatal vitamin. Kim, I know this is way more information than you asked for. Let's talk about when to start taking a prenatal vitamin. Ideally, you start taking a prenatal before you get pregnant. That's going to ensure that your body is prepared to support your health and your baby's development from the very start. Starting a prenatal early also gives your body time to adjust to those extra vitamins and minerals. And neural tube defects are common in early pregnancy. So if you are trying to conceive, I would start taking a prenatal vitamin now. And if that's not possible, the next best time to start a prenatal is just as soon as you realize that you're pregnant. The next question is kind of the other end of the spectrum. This comes from Jocelyn. Her email reads, I would like to know if you have a recommendation for postnatal vitamins. Maybe the same for prenatal. My baby is 22 days. Jocelyn, congrats on having your baby. I hope that you are navigating healing from birth and motherhood and the postpartum period well. So after having your baby, your body is in recovery mode from birth, and you're likely breastfeeding. You still require additional nutrients to support your health and your healing after you have a baby. And if you're breastfeeding, you're still supplying your baby with all the nutrients that they need through breast milk. If you're taking a high quality prenatal, I don't see a downside to continuing that in the postpartum period. Some people have issues with prenatal vitamins, things like constipation because of the additional iron. Hopefully you're taking a high quality prenatal that's using a form of iron that doesn't exacerbate constipation. The only other downside to continuing a prenatal vitamin is that they tend to be more expensive than a typical multivitamin. So really, you can switch your prenatal vitamin for a multivitamin anytime after you have your baby. In the future, if you plan on having more kids, you can always switch back to a prenatal. I took a prenatal for years while I was having kids. I started before getting pregnant for the first time with my son, and then continued taking that after he was born and all the way through having my daughter and well into the postpartum period. Part of that reason, I really love the Zoller Prenatal Plus DHA. It's a great high quality vitamin. I liked it. It agreed with my body. So it was just really easy to continue taking that. The next question comes from Iona. First off, I love your podcast. I'm having an issue I hope you can help with. I've always had a very hard time swallowing pills, and I have issues with taking a prenatal vitamin. It doesn't help that I also have been really nauseous. I want to take the best vitamin possible, but I can't bring myself to swallow a huge pill multiple times a day. Iona, thank you for submitting your question. You're definitely not the only one who has an issue swallowing pills. And I know that some of these prenatal vitamins or multivitamins are really big. Plus, morning sickness can make that even worse. So, first thing, you need to find a prenatal vitamin that works for you. So I would suggest trying to find an alternative that's either a smaller pill or that's in a different form. Zoller does have a significantly smaller prenatal vitamin. It's called the Mighty Mini. This also includes DHA, which is not in a lot of prenatal vitamins, and it has all of the high quality level of ingredients that Zoller is known for. If swallowing a pill of any size is a problem, you can also try alternatives like gummy vitamins, chewable tablets, or a powder formula that you mix with water. There is a resource that I like to use if I'm looking into a new vitamin or supplement, and that is labdoor.com. This is a third party that ranks vitamins and supplements based on label accuracy, product purity, nutritional value, ingredient safety, and projected efficacy. I'll put a link in the transcript for this episode so that you can see their prenatal vitamin rankings. Unfortunately, most of the ranked prenatal vitamins are pills, but I still think that this will be helpful to look at brands. And while the products listed in any category on Labdoor are somewhat limited, that tends to be a really great starting place to find brands that are rated really high and then look into products that those brands carry. I would personally avoid brands that are rated really poorly. If you decide to go with a gummy vitamin, most gummy prenatals will not include iron. And that's because if you're including iron with a gummy vitamin, that poses a lot of challenges with texture and taste. If you end up taking a gummy prenatal that does not include iron, you might consider taking a separate iron supplement. And we talked a lot about iron earlier in this episode. And whether you want to try a gummy or a powder or anything else, you can always ask your doctor or midwife if they have a recommendation or if you should be taking an additional supplement like iron if your prenatal vitamin does not include that nutrient. Iona, I'm so sorry that you're dealing with morning sickness. It's really terrible. But there are some suggestions if your prenatal vitamin is contributing to nausea. One is to try taking it with a snack or a small meal so that you're not taking it on an empty stomach. And you may also consider taking it during a time of day when you feel less nauseous. If there is a time, I know for some expecting moms, morning sickness tends to be constant. You can also try taking it in the evening before you go to bed. Remember, your prenatal vitamin should help to fill any nutrient gaps, but the majority of vitamins and nutrients that you need and that your baby needs should really be coming from your diet. If there are specific nutrients that you want to ensure that you're getting, or if you have a gummy prenatal that doesn't include iron, or you're taking a prenatal vitamin that doesn't include DHA, you can always increase foods in your diet that are high in those nutrients. There are separate episodes on iron and on DHA and omega-3s and fish oil, and I will link to both of those episodes. Iona, I hope this is helpful. And it's really about you just finding a prenatal vitamin that works for you. To recap today's episode, we talked about a lot of questions relating to prenatal vitamins. We talked about the difference between a prenatal and a multivitamin, got into folic acid and folate and iron, talked about when you should start taking a prenatal vitamin. Ideally, that's before you get pregnant. Although please do not beat yourself up if you did not take a prenatal before you got pregnant. The next best time is to just take it once you realize that you're going to have a baby. We talked about how long you need to take your prenatal vitamin and whether you should continue that postpartum, and tackled some questions about having difficulty swallowing pills and talked about some other options to make sure that you're getting all of those vitamins and nutrients that you and your baby need. I want to thank you for tuning into the Pregnancy Podcast today. I hope that you find this episode helpful. You can read the full transcript and see all of the resources that accompany this episode at pregnancypodcast.com/vitamin questions. My number one recommendation for a prenatal vitamin is the Zoller Prenatal Plus DHA. And that's because Zoller goes above and beyond in formulating their vitamin with high quality ingredients. Rather than using folic acid, which is what most prenatal vitamins have, Zoller uses a body-ready form that does not require complex conversion. This matters because about half of people have trouble metabolizing folic acid properly. This is one of the many reasons why this is my top recommendation for a prenatal vitamin. In the month of November 2025, save 35% on the Zoller Prenatal Plus DHA on Amazon with the code PREPOD35. You can always check for the current promo code at pregnancypodcast.com/vitamin. If you're looking for more evidence-based information, or you would just like an ad-free experience, become a Pregnancy Podcast Premium member. Premium members get every single episode of the podcast ad-free, including hundreds of episodes exclusively available to premium members. Check out Pregnancy Podcast Premium at pregnancypodcast.com/premium.